And we're back in it to the final episode of the psychology document that before we start grinding out questions this afternoon. So, let's talk about a demographic transition. It's a model that changes in a country's population. Population will eventually start growing when country transitions from a high birth rate and a death rate to a low birth rate and death rate, which stabilizes the population. This stabilization often occurs in industrialized and developed countries. When immigrants travel to developed countries, they affect demographic transition of the country by increasing fertility and decreasing mortality. Refers to a theory of economic development and population change. The theory suggests that economic changes, specifically industrialization, affects the relationship between the fertility and mortality rate in the society. Population growth occurs rapidly because the mortality rate falls between the fertility rate does. Over time, the fertility rate also falls, then establishing a lower rate of population growth. Growth rate is positive because economic benefits. Children can work to support family. Sometimes the government provides economic incentive to families who have children. Religious influence population growth promotes larger families, increased number of birth of that faith, and promotes stronger community. Some religions forbid use of contraceptives by followers. Cultural influence of large families. Children means you get to pass down family traits and values. Prestige of having children. So let's talk about the model. There's 5 stages. Stage 1 is their high birth rates due to limited birth control, economic advantage, and more workers, and a high death rate due to disease and poor nutrition. Most countries at this stage are prior to 18th century, when death rates fall in Western Europe. Yet large, young, and small population. For population remains fairly stable. We have the pyramid model. It's a stationary pyramid. Large young population and a small old population. Stage 2 is seen in the beginning of a developing population countries. Population rises as disease rate decreases and lower death rate. Availability of food, improvement in health, and sanctions. Trend was seen in the 19th century, Western Europe after Industrial Revolution. High birth rates remain, overall population growth. Pyramid model, early expanding population pyramid. High birth rates and death rate decline, so you get a nice pyramid shape. Okay. Stage 3 is the death rate containing the drop and birth rate begins to fall. Example, middle class population continues to grow. Birth rates fall because of birth control. Social trends towards smaller family. Death rate drops because society has better health care. Occurs in countries that are more industrialized. Fewer children deaths, and children no longer need to work by law. In this stage, children sent to school instead of working to support the family. This pyramidal model is the late expanding population pyramid, where the birth rate declines, fewer young people and people are living longer as people are getting older. Stage 4 is the population stabilizes, both birth and death rates are low and balance each other out. Population is large because it has been growing until stage 4. Low birth rates is improvement in contraception and high percentage of workforce. Women in the workforce. Many couples focus on careers over children. Pyramid is the low stationary pyramid. Low birth rates and low death rates, longer life expectancy. Stage 5 is the speculation that the world population will be forced to stabilize. According to Malthusian theorem suggests run out of resources, the global food shortage. We won't be able to maintain natural resources for everyone on the planet, so a higher morbidity rate. Current 1 billion suffer from malnutrition around the world of 7 billion. Lack of resources will lead to a public health disaster and force population to stabilize and then a negative growth rate. Negative growth rate would occur when a population is forced to finally have a lower birth rate than death rate. Pyramid is constrictive, fewer young people and then older people due to rise in individualism. Anti-Malthusian theory is couples only want to have one child or have children later in life. Okay? Better standard of living equals smaller families because children are economic burdens. Also, industrialized nations have better education, access to healthcare, because of reproductive choices. China has government policies to slow population growth to preserve their resources. Growth rate can increase as well. Some evidence, higher standard of living promotes fertility and higher birth rate. Summary, demographic transition shifts from a high birth rate and death rate to a low death and birth rate as the country becomes industrialized. What happens in stage 5 is hard to tell. So here's the model, the high stationary. So there's a low birth rate, a high death rate, or a neutral birth rate and a high death rate. As the death rate decreases, the birth rate the same. Population grows. As the birth rate decreases, then the population starts to become stationary. Alright, some globalization theories. Globalization is the sharing of culture, money, and products between countries due to international trade and achievement in transportation and communication. Social process where people become more aware of cultures of people or across geographic and political and social borders. Contributors to globalization. Economic independence between countries, advancements in communication, technologies in general. Globalization allows for international terrorism, civil unrest, foreign cultures integrated into each country, world economics where countries become interdependent. It's not recent, it's been around since the silk and spice trade routes, or the English-Dutch shipping empire. The world systems theory is important of the world as unit rather than individual countries. Divides the world into 3 countries, core, peripheral, and semi-peripheral. The core is the Western Europe and US strong central government, with enough tax to support it, economic diverse, industrialized, independent of outside control. Strong middle and working class focuses on a higher scope of production. Peripheral is like Latin America and Africa. Relatively weak governments, great influence by, depends on core countries and transnational corporation. Economy focus on narrow economic activity and extracting raw material. Highest percentage of poor, uneducated people and strong upper class that controls most of the economy. Semi-peripheral is India and Brazil, middle ground between core and peripheral. Not dominant in international trade, but diverse developed economy. These semi-peripheral countries can come either from peripheral countries moving up to core countries, or core countries declining towards peripheral status. It is a fluid model, criticized on being too focused on core countries and economics, ignoring class struggle. The modernization theory is all countries follow the similar path of development from traditional and modern society. With some help, traditionally countries can develop similarly to today's developed countries. Look at international social dynamics and country adapts new technology. Looks at political and social changes that occurs during adaptation as well. Dependency theory reaction to the modernization theories use the idea of core and peripheral countries to look at inequalities between countries. Peripheral countries export resources to core countries. This is not because they are in an early stage of development, but they have been integrated to the world economic as a undeveloped country. They don't mean that means to become a developed country. They will remain poor and dependent on wealthy nations. Hyper-globalist perspective is we see globalization as a new age in human history. Countries become interdependent and national states themselves are less important. Countries become one global society. Theorists don't agree if this is good or bad, driven by a legitimate process. The skeptic perspective is critic of globalization, considers that being regionalized instead of globalized. Third world countries aren't being integrated into global economies with same benefits as the first world. Current economy is not leading towards a global capitalism. Transnational corporations still tied. Home countries and national borders remain important. Okay. Transformation perspective is doesn't have special cause or outcome. Believes that national governments are changing, perhaps becoming less important, but difficult to explain change so simply. They say the world order is changing. Just a new world order is being developed. Many factors that influence change of world patterns, but outcome unknown. So it's saying that it's changing. The national governments are changing how they interact. So globalization for trade and transnational corporations. So globalization is we live in a global community, not limited but physical borders. Not limited by physical borders. People connect by the internet, ease of travel, communications. People, money, ideas, services, goods, information are moving towards countries which cause cultural and economic changes. Countries. Technology has allowed for increased possibility of international trade and exchange. Increase in trade has been created and supported by international regulatory groups like World Trade Organizations and transnational agreement like the North America Free Trade Agreement. No country completely independent. Without international trade, no need for groups. Without group trades would be impractical in today's scale. The trade regulatory groups regulate flow of goods and services between countries, reduce tariffs, and makes customs easier. It makes trading across border more feasible. Agreements often benefit private industries the most. Companies that extend beyond borders of a country are called multinational transnational corporations. These TC cross borders to take opportunities they can find in different countries to manufacture, distribute, market, and sell their products. Examples: McDonald's, Coca-Cola, General Electricity, Ford Motor Company are all based on this idea, but it has half the business in the US, employees working in other countries. Mostly markets themselves as American companies. Some TC have more weight than entire nations. Influence economic politicals by donating money by specific political campaigns and lobbyists, influencing global trade laws and regulatory groups. Globalization has two major impacts on a country: economy and culture. Much of economic globalization results from a global market competition for cheap labor and locating factories in cheap locations. Developed nations provide incentives like tax-free zones or cheap labor so TC can bring jobs and industry to agricultural areas. This allows for rapid advancement of developing nations because of ideas and innovation they bring to the developed world. Makes nations around the world more independent, which minimizes conflict. Negatives of incentives is workers abroad exploited, wages are cut, prohibited from unionizing, sweatshop conditions, in host country and outsourcing, made possible by globalization, can hurt core country. Side note, if labor laws become too restrictive in one country, they move their factories to a new country, which leaves unemployment in the country they moved from. Outsourcing leads to a great profit for companies and more employment in host countries. Free trades given these transcontinental companies autonomy and influence in politics allows workers to be exploited. Positive, this is better allocation of resources, higher product output, more employment worldwide, cheaper prices, benefit for all countries. Free trade also encourages cultural practices and expression to be passed abroad by group to group. Diffusion, ideas and practices spread from a place where they are well known, apparent to places where they are new and not often observed. Most commonly seen in spread of North American culture and transfer to scientific innovations. Upper class of host country can benefit by business. Let's talk about social movements. Social movements is when a group of people come together with a shared idea and create lasting effects by encouraging such resisting change in society, which both play a role in shaping future society. Social movement needs organization, leadership, and resources to gain momentum and make an impact. A small group of ideas, not a social movement. How to form a social movement. Groups with a strong sharing idea that has resources, leadership to survive that make an impact. Activist movements aim to change some aspect of society, while regression and reactivity movements resist change. Several theories of social movements form. There's a mass society theory, which is skepticism about a group that were involved in social movement. It says social movements would only form for people seeking refuge from main society. Example, Nazism, fascism, Stalinism. People who joined social movements were dysfunctional, irrational, and dangerous. Theory did not persist. People only joined to satisfy a psychological need for involvement. After 1960 civil rights movement, different theories came to light. Relative deprivation theory. Actions of groups oppressed, deprived of rights that others in society enjoy. Civil rights movement in response to oppression. We need three things to have a social movement to form. Relative deprivation. Those who join the social movement are not necessarily worse off. Those who join are not necessarily worse off. What important is how people perceive their situation. Someone making 100K cannot be happy, while someone making very little can be happy. Feelings of discrepancy between legitimate expectations are reality of presence. Feelings of deserving better and conventional means are useless. Believe conventional methods are useless to get help. Criticism: people who don't feel deprived join social movements even if they don't suffer themselves, and too risky for oppressed to join a movement due to lack of resources. Also, when all three are present, no social movement is created. Resource mobilization theory looks at social movements from a different angle. Instead of looking at deprivation of people, focus on factors that help hinder a social movement like access to resources. Gathering together people of shared ideas is not allowed everywhere. Also, for a social movement, you need money, material, political influence, media, and strong organization base to recruit members. Example: Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. For the rational choice theory, people compare pros and cons of different choices of action and choose the one they think is best for them. These choices shape pattern of behavior in society. Have to assume a lot for this to be true. 1. All actions can be listed in order of preference. All preferences are transients. Example: I like apples better than pears and pears better than bananas, so I like apples better than bananas. Also assumes persons have full knowledge of outcomes due to action, and then people have the ability to weigh different actions. Rarely all true. Social movements can affect people not involved in themselves. Social movements can cause widespread panic, such as anti-vaccine movements or crazy fads. So, social movement stages. We begin with shared ideas by few. Then we have an inceptive stage where public takes notice of the situation that they consider to be a problem. And then people begin to organize in a group and raise up. And then 4, they either succeed in changing the society or have to adapt. In the end, they become part of bureaucracy they tried to change. If they're successful, they become absorbent institutions once desired change has been achieved. If failed, they are not active anymore but leave a mark on society and culture. A culture and society is formed from past social movements. Even failed social movements lead to mark. Example, Martin Luther's movement against Catholic Church resulted in the Protestant Church. Martin Luther King's Jr.'s social movement against segregation that led to the Civil Rights Movement. And Nazis left a mark on world politics. In their time, social movements seemed radical, far-fetched, and extreme, but now we accept their goals. A person now has a right to freedom and equality. Overview of demographics. Urbanization is the movement of people from farms to cities. The functional perspective of cities are good and bad for a society. They are centered of culture and diverse in crime. Conflict theory, source of inequalities where the elite use the poor for their resources to enrich their own lives. Cultural diversity leads to conflict between different beliefs and values. Symbolic interaction of cities are hubs of cultures with strong norms and values. Reason to move to a city: jobs, better utilities, easy access to hospitals, schools. People moving affect people who live there. You need to join small communities to make friends and connections. Some people need to move away from cities, but not to rural. Some people move to outskirts of cities called suburbs, where people can form communities with their neighbors while maintaining individuality. Exurbs are beyond suburbs who are very prosperous. They drive to city for work and can be tiresome, so some suburbs create their own economic centers. Some people rebuild areas of the city called urban renewal, which can lead to gentrification, where wealthy people force lower income people out. Rural rebound is some people desire to get away from urban areas and move back to rural. Population dynamics talks about how population grows and shrinks over time. Look at fertility, migration, and mortality rate. Look at year worth of population change at a time. Fertility is the rate when people are born in a population, increased population. Migration is 2 factors, emigration and immigration. Emigration is when you move out, immigration is when you move in. Reasons for migration is refugee, work, living in a different country. Mortality is a rate at which people are dying, which decreases the population. Look at population pyramid to look at population of the country. X-axis is gender and y-axis is age. Look at the number of people of each age group there are. Expansive pyramids, lots of deaths and lots of births. Lots of young people, not many old people. Stationary pyramid is birth rates and death rates are lower. Lots of everybody. Constricted pyramid is low births and death rates. More old people than young people. Growth rate equals initial population plus birth, immigration minus immigration minus deaths. New population. If new population is greater than the old population, there's growth. If the old population is greater than, it's negative growth. Most countries growing, but Bulgaria and Syria are shrinking. Fertility and immigration increase population, while death and immigration decrease the population. Demographic transition. Models have changed country population, high birth and death rates, transition to low birth and death rates. 5 stages: high birth and death rates, stable population. Number 2 is high birth rates and declining death rates due to better sanitation and food supply, increase in population. Number 3 is lower birth rates and lower death rates, which concept on social value and changing, sometimes change decline in death rates. Population stops growing as quickly. Number 4 is birth rates and death rates are balanced, which population stabilizes. lots of people because of all growth in 1 and 3. And then number 5 is the speculated stage, where population continues to remain steady, increases or decreases. Less birth and more deaths. Model changes population in the country of the world. Globalization is sharing of ideas, culture, services across national borders due to the process of technology independent of countries' advancements. People migrate to different countries or work in different countries, bring their customers. The world system theory is the theory that world is a single unit divided into 3 regions: core countries, peripheral countries, and semi-peripheral countries. Core countries are supplied by peripheral countries, and semi-peripheral are developing middle ground between core and peripheral. It can be caused by declining core or rising peripheral. Modernization theory is every country has a similar path in development from traditional to modern, and today third world countries can reach the same as development as today's first world with help over time. Dependency theory is the reaction to modernization theory and states that third world countries have their own unique structure and are poor and remain so because of their poor and unfavorable economic position. Other theories look at cultures, social network, economies, and goods. Hyperglobalist is individual countries become less important as countries become interdependent and global studies take presence. Skeptics believe the world is becoming regionalized, not globalized. Transnational corps are still tied to their home countries. Transformationalist national governments import change in world order design change. Transnational corps live across border for cheaper material and labor. Some make more money in a year than some countries. Countries become less self-dependent and interconnected, and there are both positive and negative effects of globalization. Negatives: countries competing to provide cheapest labor. Benefits as well. Globalization affects culture and economy of every country with foreign ties. Social movements: active is to change something about society. Regressive or reactionary is a resistance social change. Group of people with a shared ideal who will have resources and strong leadership to reach a shared goal to make an impact on people. Social movements is an environment movement has impact on their society. Social movements seen differently over time. Early 20th century people joined movements to seek meaning in lives. Social movements are now an instrument part of evolution of society. The relative deprivation theory says deprivation and inequality will band together to change the inequality. Resource mobilization theory says you need to have resources to fund the movement to publicize. Rational choice theory's pattern behaviors in society depend on people who weigh different options and choose that one that benefits them the most. And social movements can cause panic or crazes. 2 options: fail and fade away, or succeed to become integrated in society. So that was a summary of basically everything that we just talked about. So now let's move into culture. So, culture is the way of life shared by a group of individuals. It's the knowledge, beliefs, and values that bind a society together. Very diverse. Can include artwork, language, and literature, ways of thinking, behaving, and feeling connected to shared knowledge of a society. Society is the way people organize themselves, a bunch of people who live together in a specific geographic area and interact more with each other than outsiders. Share a common culture over time. Culture equals rules that guide the way people live. Society equals structure that provides organization for people. Society includes institutions that we talked about previously, like education, family, politics, and it provides support and structure. Analog softwares on apps on a phone can't physically be touched and are constantly being updated. New human ideas form cultures to allow society to work. You have to allow a phone to be useful. Culture and society need to be both exist and function. Let's look at some overview of culture. Society is a group of people, and culture talks about rules and instruction within a society that teach them how to live. Culture is ideas that are passed on between generations in society. Knowledgeable beliefs, values, language, and customs varies as we travel around the globe. Difference in cultures across the globe. American toothpaste, toothbrush, and other colors use twigs from trees. People sleep in beds while others sleep on animal skins or mats. English, 500 million speakers. Chinese, 1 billion speakers. Hindi, 480 million. Spanish, 400 million. Many like meat and vegetables while others eat tofu and grasshoppers. Way of greeting differently. Each social unit has a unique way of life due to difference in culture. Culture provides guidelines for actions, interactions within society. 4 main points of culture. Okay. People share culture in society. All people share culture with others in society, provides rules, expectations, and carrying out daily rituals. Okay. 2. Culture is adaptive, evolves over time and adapts. Normal hunting gathers, cooperating courage different than today's information technology. Culture builds on itself. Creation of culture is ongoing, commutative, and society builds on existing culture to adapt new challenges and opportunities. Normal values are shaped by culture. Putting a baby in a crib is strange in other worlds. Culture differs from around the world. Culture is transmitted from one generation to the next. We teach a way of life to the next generation. Humans are only animals with culture to adapt to environment. So we have high culture to refer to patterns of experience and attitudes that exist in the highest class segments of society. Tends to be associated with wealthy and formal. Normative culture refers to values and behaviors that are aligned with large society norms. Popular culture refers to the pattern of experiences and attitudes that exist within a mainstream, like playing a game or watching a parade. Subculture versus counterculture. Culture, again, is ideas, society, value, beliefs, and rules that make up society, and society is the structure that organizes people. Subculture is a culture's idea of meso-level sub-community that distinguishes itself from a large dominant culture. Subculture is smaller than a nation, but unlike a microculture, it is large enough to support people through their entire lifespan. Subculture affects your life on a longer period than a microculture. Meso-level is a population size that falls between micro and macro levels. There are medium-sized groups such as community, organizations, cities, states. There's a sub-community, a smaller community, and a large one. Subcultures are unique to a larger society but still share some of the culture of a dominant society. Microculture can support people throughout their lifespan. First to group organization only affecting limited people at times. Example, Girl Scouts, college, sororities, boarding schools. Okay. Subcultures include ethnic groups like Mexicans or Orthodox Jews, or groups like elite, upper class. Subcultures can cause tension within a dominant group, which has the power to determine the cultural expectations of society. When laws of dominant society is violated, a counterculture results. Counterculture is a group of expectation values that strongly disagree with the main values from a large society. So, a counterculture to the Catholic Church was the Protestant movement. First to a subculture that rejects some of the large cultural norms and values, and usually developed one of its own norms. Example, Mormons believe in polygamy, which polygamy equals more than one spouse. Polygyn equals more than one wife. Polyandry is a woman that has multiple husbands. And my friend once told me that polyandry, remember, is multiple husbands because there's multiple Andys. Kind of dumb, but it's funny. Okay, example, old, old order Amish. Reject mainstream ideas about their own ideas. Rejects technology and consumerism. Alright, let's talk about Jim Goes to College subculture. So national society is a population of people who usually live within a specific geographic area. Connected by common ideas, work towards a common goals. Within a nation, many small groups, ethnic, region, tribals, make up those close. Subculture is a culture of a small community that distinguishes itself from a larger. Different cities, states, regions in the U.S. may have their own unique subcultures. Example, Jim grew up in Florida his whole life, but got into university in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of difference between the two. Has a parallel park, watch for pedestrians, and has to pay for parking. Driving in CC is not the same in Florida, much more traffic. Gym learning is a better option to ride the metro in DC. Okay? Sure. I don't know how that's relevant. It's just a story. Develop on subculture of college. Cultural lag and cultural shock. Cultural lag is the fact that culture takes time to catch up and technology results in social problems. Common societies because material culture changes rapidly while non-material culture tends to resist change. Material culture refers to the physical and technical aspects of our daily life like foods and houses and phones. Non-material is symbolic culture. It doesn't include physical objects like ideas, beliefs, which tend to resist change. Examples: many technology output cultural adaptation options. Can first invented no laws that govern driving. Very dangerous when cars first started entering roads, but laws soon written to fix problem. Computer emails invented and business took time to use technology. Culture shock, feelings of disorientation, uncertainty, or even fear when they encounter unfamiliar culture practices. Example: moving countries, move social environments, or travel to another type of life. So culture shock is feelings of disorientation, uncertainty, or even fear when they come encounter unfamiliar practices. In foreign places, weather, language, landscape, food, values, and customer way business conducted can be completely different. Everything you're used to is no longer in place. As a result, a culture shock may feel sad, lonely, homestead, confused. Question your decision of moving to this new place. Example: culture shock. People from Islamic countries like Algeria visit countries in Western Europe like Spain and Italy. Individuals from Islamic countries might experience culture shock when unmarried couples are kissing or holding hands in public, and women are wearing what they consider revealing clothes. This would be a culture shock because they're experiencing things different from in their own countries, their own cultures. Alright, diffusion. Diffusion from a sociology perspective is the spread of invention or discovery of ideas from one place to another. Spread ideas such as capitalism, democracy, religious belief has brought change in human relations around the world. Spread of music, phone technology, computer hardware, software has made a difference in how people connect with others across the globe. Involves expansion of ideas across the globe and can occur in many ways. Exploration, military conquest, missionary work. Examples: example of diffusion is food in America is seen around the world, such as McDonald's in Asia, Nike in Japan or Australia. Spanish is one of the fastest growing languages, or the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. Diffusion between cultures has occurred through history, but today it has happened faster because of social media. Cultural assimilation is the interpretation and fusion of ethnic minorities into the dominant culture. So it's basically integrating ethnic minorities into the dominant culture. So as you're assimilating them to align with the main culture. Mass media is the dissemination of information, how information is transmitted through a culture. Indeed, print media, it's how consumed changes across culture in each group. So older people might get info from TV and newspaper, while younger people get it from the internet. Can look at the role media plays through society through different sociological perspectives. According to the functionalist perspective, its main role is to provide entertainment. Occupy our leisure time. Also says it has an age and a socialization. Collective experience of watching Olympics or community building. Forces of social norms. Also tells us what society expects us through rewards and punishments, such as seeing criminals, but can also glorify behaviors that are wrong in society, like intense physical violence. Also functions as a promoter of consumer culture. At the turn of the century, average U.S. student saw 2,000 commercials a year. Only increase from there, and not clear what impact this might have on the next generation. The conflict perspective focuses on how the media portrays and reflects divisions that exist in society. Use term gatekeeping to describe the process by which small numbers of people and corporations control what information is present on the media. And describes information, things that appear in newspaper stories made in movies, what TV shows are turned into pilots. how this information moves through a series of gates before they reach the public. Some countries this is decided by the government, in others decided by a large media corporation. Gatekeeping has more effects on some media than others. Examples: lots of control on big budget movies but little overhead control on what must be posted. Also described how mass media reflects the dominant ideology. Given time, space, or privilege certain politics, economics, and social interests at the same time, limiting other views. People who make the choice of what media is produced. The gatekeepers are predominantly white, male, and wealthy. Portrays of racial minorities or LGBT groups, working class people, women, can be underrepresented or stereotyped. There have been some attempts to fix underrepresentation and stereotyping, but these attempts have something resolved in tokenism instead of diversity, where one minority character is added to a movie as a stand for the entire group. Feminist theory is similar to conflict theory in the mass media. Stereotypes and misassociated dominant ideology say about men and women are represented in media. Depictions of men and women and other stereotypes emphasize traditional sex roles or gender roles. Men are considered normal and women are considered other. Example: pens and pens for her, or razors for women. Women are depicted as victims, men as aggressors. Women are depicted as shallow or being obsessed with looks, making it more likely they'd be sexualized or objectified. The interactionist perspective looks at mass media on micro level to see how it shapes day-to-day behavior. How mass media blurs lines between solidarity and group activities. Example: watching a movie. You can be watching with other people, but because of societal norms, theater rules, you can't talk about it and those who you're watching with. Looks at how we connect with others using media changes over time. Email and text messages instead of phone or online dating increases. Evolution in human culture. Culture is the customs, knowledge, and behaviors that are learned and social transmitted, including ideas, values, and objects meaningful to a group or people. Culture is typically learned through observation, interactions, and the biological component. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution: both physical traits and behavioral can be selected for if they contribute to the success of a species. Example: in biology, physical traits can be selected for. Interactions between organisms and their environment can cause finches with long, short beaks in different environments. Behaviors can be selected for if they're selected for fitness of an animal. Well, because there are cultural universals that exist throughout the world for certain things, behaviors which might be selected for human species evolved. And then cultural universals. All cultures have the way of dealing with illness, medicine, healing, weddings, funeral ceremonies, language. Evolution can shape culture, but can also think how culture can shape human evolution. Example: hunter-gathering societies versus farming societies. People moved less and populations grew. Because of this, people were more exposed to the outbreaks of disease. Hence, only those who could survive were the ones not killed by disease. Our culture, these communities can help shape our immune systems. Or lactose until its first year of life, most humans to get nutrition from milk. But genes to digest this milk are switched after children are weaned. But North Europeans, which reared cattle, doesn't have this effect. Their lactase gene doesn't turn off, so those are ability to digest milk more likely to survive. More surviving digesting milk people, so more digesting milk, lactose tolerant offspring. They can drink milk, eat dairy products because ancestral culture directing of evolution. Cultural transmission addresses how culture is learned. Culture is passed along from generation to generation through various child rearing practices, including when parents expose children to music. So we're past 300. Let's keep going. Social inequalities. Let's talk about social inequalities. Resources in a society are unevenly distributed. Wealth in U.S. top 20% have 72% of the wealth of the country, and bottom 20% only have control 3. Upper, middle, and lower class, based on incomes. As you go up the social ladder, have better access to education, healthcare, and housing. Groups of population disproportionately affect ethnic and racial minorities have greater degrees of inequality as manifested by lower incomes. Those in poverty often face considerable barriers to obtaining the same healthcare, education, and other resources. Gender does too. Females experience a gender pay gap and the glass ceiling effect where are poorly represented in higher positions in companies. People may feel increasingly socially excluded, living in segregation neighborhoods, or feeling politically dispowered, leading to civil unrest and tempting people into criminal activities. Ways to help is government schemes like food stamps to improve access to education and healthcare, and figure out social interventions that allow the integration into society. Health disparity is a difference in health outcomes that comes related to social and economic factors. Social inequality causes the difference, not a biological one. Upward and downward mobility. We have a number of ways to break down society into social layers. Example classes. Lower classes, manual work, labor, low paying jobs. Middle classes, professionals, better paying jobs. Upper classes, very wealthy businessmen and family wealth according to the amount of income. When we think of social positions, can there be a movement? Yes, various ways. Individuals can move horizontally mobility. Moves within the same class. Example, accountants switch jobs to a different accounting job. Vertical movement moves up or down the social hierarchy. Managers at a restaurant become CEOs of fast food restaurant, but he gets demoted to serving food and falls downwards. But if he gets demoted to serving food, falls downwards. Various types of social constructs that allow for social mobility. There's case systems with very little social mobility because your role is determined entirely by background. You're born to who you're married to. A lot of social stability. The Hindu caste system. The class system allows for degrees of social mobility, combination of background and movement, often by education, less stability. Democracy is the concept of people achieve social positions solely based on ability and achievements. Highly idealized. Birth, the parental background doesn't matter. Extreme social mobility, equal opportunity. So meritocracy is basically focused on your abilities and achievements. Social reward status and position are awarded to individuals based on their own ability to work. In order for a democracy to operate, everyone in society needs the same opportunity to succeed, so the rewards are actually based primarily on merit. Not necessary for everyone to have the same talent or skill level as the outcome. It just means everyone has the same opportunity to achieve. It means achievement is not prescribed at birth. It means there's a high degree of mobility. Democracy is a system under which individuals are rewarded on the basis of individual skill, talent, or achievement. Alright, let's intergenerational and intragenerational mobility. If changes in a social class happen in a person's own life, it's intragenerational mobility. If it changes between generations, intergenerational mobility. Where parents is working class, son is working class. How's that a change? But okay. Absolute and relative poverty. There's two different ways of thinking about poverty. Does it threaten survival of a person or does it exclude them from society? Absolute poverty is the level where you go below and survival is threatened. Minimum level of resources are required being needed to survive. This level, no matter where you are, approximately $1 to $2 a day, talking about developed countries. However, some in Arctic need a lot more than somewhere else. There's variable absolute poverty does not consider. Median level income in a society can gradually rise in a country to get richer. When it does, we find people live in absolute poverty, decrease in poverty. Relative poverty is in developed countries use a different marker as the number of people below the median level. In US, instead of $1 to $2 a day, median income is above $80. So 60% of the median income. If the country income rises up, absolute poverty won't change. Median income would. Relative poverty is not about survival, it's people whose incomes are so low in their own society that they become excluded from society. Okay? Social reproduction. Huge amounts of social inequalities between rich families and poor families. Large social inequalities seem to replicate itself across generation. Purpose of inequalities through social institutions, social mobility counters this. People with rich parents end up with wealth themselves. Social reproduction. means they're reproducing social inequality across generation. They have high financial capital and can invest and attain social capital, building up reliable, useful social networks. Social capital, the networks of relationship among people who live and work in a particular society, enables society to function effectively. Social networks provide a valuable resource. Social capital is believed to result in various health benefits for the individual, including reductions in the health risk of chronic inflammation. Partially related to social support, social capital emphasizes the tangible resources provided by network members. Both social support and social capital suggest that social contexts will be beneficial to individuals' health and well-being. Social network and health. Social network is types includes peer network, family network, community network. Can also expose you to cultural capital. If parents exposing you to trips abroad and learning foreign language are cultural items in our house, you know about them. Cultural capital is the term refers to the non-financial social assets that promote social mobility beyond economic means. Examples include education, intelligence, style of speech, dress, physical appearance. Refers to knowledge, skills, education, and similar characters that are used to make social distinctions and are associated with different in social class. Does an education still allow poor people to gain capital too? Our education system doesn't value cultures of low classes. It doesn't value the culture and society networks of poor populations. Education systems can reinforce this social stratification. Social stratification is the idea that society categorization of people into social strata based upon their occupation, income, wealth, social status, and deprived power. As such, stratification is the relative social position of persons within a social group, category, geographic region, or social. In modern Western society, social stratification typically is distinguished as three social classes: the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class. In turn, each class has been subdivided in strata: the upper stratum, the middle stratum, and the lower stratum. Moreover, a social stratum can be formed upon the basis of kinship or caste or both. There's four principles that are postulated underlie social stratification. First, social stratification is socially defined as the property of society rather than individuals in that society. Second, social stratification is reproduced from generation to generation. Third, social stratification is universal. And then fourth, social stratification involves not only quantitative inequalities but qualitative. Okay. Complexity. Although stratification is not limited to complex societies, all complex societies exhibit features of stratification. In any complex society, the total stock of valued goods is distributed unequally, wherein the most privileged and individual and families enjoy a disproportional share of income, power, and other valued resources. The term stratification system is sometimes used to refer to the complex social relationships social generate these observed inequalities. The key component of these systems are social institutional processes that define certain types of goods and valuable desires. The rules of allocation that distribute goods and resources across different divisions of labor. Social mobility, process that links individuals to positions that for generate unequal control. Social mobility is the movement of individuals, social groups, or categories of people between the layers of strata in a stratification system. Open stratification systems are those that allow for mobility between strata, typically by placing value on the achieved status, characteristics, or individuals. Those societies have higher levels of intergenerational mobility and are considered to be most open and malleable. System of stratification. Those systems in which there is little no mobility, even are intergenerational based, are considered closed, resembling systems that are ascribed, such as one social position at birth is position holds for a lifetime. Alright. Social exclusion. Being an integral member of society has a lot of advantages: access to good social networks, housing, education, resource, and community. But certain individuals can be excluded in the peripheral society and are prevented from participating in society. Reduced rights and access to resources. Some can drag people into the peripheral of society. The poverty magnet can drag people away from the core part of society and experience a greater deal of social inclusion. The ill health magnet can also drag people away. You can't participate in society. Certain groups may face discrimination based on their race, gender, sexual orientation. This is called a discrimination magnet. Education, housing, employment all are important factors. With the lack of any of these are related to the fringe. People in periphery often have many of these magnets combined, forcing them away from society. Segregation is a way of separating out groups of people and giving them access to a separate set of resources within the same society. Idea, separate but equal, which is rarely true in practice. Segregated people often have worse resources. Segregation is maintained by law and public institutions, or a more informal process like hidden discrimination. Social isolation is when a community voluntarily isolates them from the mainstream based on their own religious, cultural, or other beliefs. So think of like a cult for social isolation. Environmental justices, where we live and play a huge role in environment and benefits and risks we're exposed to. Areas with high poverty and low racial minorities often have few environmental benefits. They also inject environmental burden compared to wealthier, which includes waste, facilities, manufacturing, value, energy production, airports. They risk because they have few alternatives, little awareness of risk they face. More health problems like asthma, obesity. Wealthier populations study have much higher benefits, more political and economic, powerful and able to demand beneficial facilities are placed close to them and burden facilities far away. Big composite is environmental justice, looks at a fair distribution of environmental benefits and burdens within society across all groups. Residential segregation is a group of people segregated in different neighborhoods, can mean race or incomes, where they live affects on life changes because it affects their politics, healthcare, availability to education. Other forms of segregation or concentration. They're clustering of different groups. Centralization of segregation of clusters in a central area. Index of dissimilarity. 0 is total segregation, 100 perfect distributions. Why is residential segregation important? As political isolation. Communities segregated are politically weak because their political interests don't overlap with other communities. Becomes politically vulnerable and doesn't have political influence to keep their own needs addressed. Linguistic isolation. Communities who are isolated may develop own countries even in the same city, may limit jobs, or access to quality education and health. And spatial mismatch, which is opportunities for low-income people in segregated countries to be presented far away and harder to access. Gap between where people live and other opportunities. So global inequalities. The world is extremely unequal. Life expectancy in Congo is 51, while in France and Japan is 84. Tremendous range, access to clean water in Africa very difficult. In US and Europe is very easy. Champagne glass can help explain inequalities in wealth. Represents the distribution of wealth. Top 1/5 have 82% global income. Poor 1/5 have 1.4 of global income. Rich 85 people in the world have more wealth than the poorest 3.5 billion. Wow, crazy. Inequalities in individual countries as well. Very poor countries can have a few extreme rich people. Maternal mortality rate is a marker for healthcare systems. In North America and Europe, 10 to 20 people per 100,000 die of childbirth. In South America, 75 of 100,000. South 170, in Central Asia, 700 plus. Health and healthcare disparities in the U.S. A lot of disparities we see in the U.S. are a result of poor economic and environmental conditions. Economic status is a pyramid. As we go, social care access and quality healthcare improves. Opposite is true for the bottom of the pyramid. More disease, less high quality healthcare, substandard housing, poor diet, dangerous job, can't afford expensive treatment. Race can play a role. Hispanic and African Americans have higher morbidity and mortality rates, worse access to healthcare, and lower quality healthcare. Even though some can be attributed to SES reasons, don't explain everything. Minorities less likely to receive everyday health care and treats for life-threatening conditions. Gender differences, men tend to use fewer preventive services like vaccines or checkups. Women require reproductive services access to reduce the local law. LGBT community might face discrimination which can limit clinics that they feel comfortable seeking help at. Transgender especially face discrimination and have a harder time finding someone who has experience working with transgender individuals, leaving them reluctant to seek services when they really need them. Intersectionality. Many types of discrimination like sex, gender, culture, race, but what if it's someone who experiences multiple forms at the same time? Example, female who is African American and practice Buddhist teachings, causing her to be discrimination against 3 different areas. Why is it important to consider intersection? Because multiple different categories of potential discrimination and compounds in one individual puts her at a disadvantage in society. Theory of intersectionality asks us to consider all the different levels of discrimination. Intersectionality calls attention to how identical categories intersect in a system of social stratification. For example, individuals positioned within a social hierarchy is determined not only by his or her social class but also his or race ethnicity. Originally coined by 1989 by Crenshaw as a feminist theory, but has since expanded out and explained oppression in all parts of society. The theory of intersection proposed that we need to understand how all these discriminations, double or triple jeopardy simultaneously exist. So the theory of intersectionality said that multiple parts of society work together for the different levels of discrimination. So if you have discrimination in medicine, if you have discrimination in health insurance, you also have discrimination in access to medicine. Alright, class consciousness and false consciousness. Means of production. Ways we produce goods, factories and farms, owned by fairly wealthy individuals, which hire a large amount of workers which offers their labor, without knowing the mean. There's class divided, a hierarchy of upper and lower class. Karl Marx is the conflict theory guy. Working class don't realize they're being exploited. Working can develop class consciousness and realize they have solidarity with one another and struggle to overcome the suppression exploits, while seizing and obtaining means and distributing the means of production among the false. False consciousness is unlike class consciousness. Instead of seeing they have solidarity with one another, they're unable to see their oppression. Owners can promote this false by controlling classes, making it more difficult for workers to see oppression. We talked about that, yeah. Alright, let's look at statistics. So, regression is all variables examined are continuous, like linear regression depends on dependency between one variable and another. Data is on a scatter plot, one way influences one variable on another. Correlation is all variables examined are continuous, unlike regression makes no assumption about which variable is influencing the other. The chi-squared is when all variables are categorical. Look at it, 2 different distributions of categorical data, null hypothesis versus alternative. The t-test is comparing mean values of continuous variables between 2 different categories / groups. The two-tail is a possible of relationship in both directions. One-tailed is one direction. ANOVA is similar to t-test, compares distribution of continuous variables between groups of categories, but can be used for 3 upgroups. Let's look at study types. Cross-sectional study is looking at groups of different people at one moment in time. Look at a group of different people at one moment in time. Okay. Cohort studies following a subset of population over a lifetime. A cohort is a group of people who share a common characteristic. So, like a cohort for like a mental health illness is like a group of a subset of group of people that have schizophrenia, let's say. And we're watching them throughout their whole lifespan. A retrospective cohort looks back at the events. A prospective follows a group of ideas, individual over a period of time. Longitudinal studies, the data is gathered from the same subjects repeated over a period of time and can take years or decades. A case control study, observation studies where 2 different groups in outcome are identified and compared to find a causal factor. Example, comparing people with disease with those who don't, but are otherwise similar. So you take histories, and then patient with conditions or cancer, and comparison group is non-patients, and it takes histories, and then you compare histories to draw a conclusion. Clinical trials are highly controlled interventional studies. Randomized controlled trial, people study randomly given one of the treatments under study used to test the efficiency and side effects of medical intervention like drugs. Gold standard for clinical trial. Experimental study would involve manipulation of variables which was not present in a study, would have independent or dependent variables. The case A experiment study is similar to experiment design but lacks random assignment. This type of design is described as affect a specific cohort of the population. 3-2 factorial design is we have 3 levels of first variable crossed with 2 levels of second variables. Such a design gives us a 3 times 2 equals 6 treatment condition. 2 variables, 2 independent variables, 3 of the first, 2 are the second. Observational studies is a study where you're just unable to control the assignment of groups and you're just watching what's occurring. Unformatted extras. Okay. Unformatted extras. Correlation is the strength of correlation based on how close the correlation between coefficient is 1 or -1. Correlation can only range between 1 and -1. Negative correlation is -1, which is a strong negative correlation. A negative correlation is a relation between two variables, which one variable increases and the other decreases. A positive correlation is when positive correlation in relation between two variables, the one increases, the other increases. Correlation that's below -1 is likely the result of an error by experimenter computing the correlation between development and dyslexia literacy. Regression to the mean is a phenomenon in which over time scores become more average. A self-report study is a cheap, non-labor intensive potential for poor reliability, vulnerable to subjective interpretation, hard to compare. A self-report study is a type of survey, questionnaire, or poll in which respondents read the questions and select a response by themselves without research interference. A self-report is any method which involves asking a participant about their feelings, attitude, beliefs, and so on. Samples of self-reporting are questionnaires and interviews. Self-reports are often used as a way of gaining participant response in observational studies and experiments. Self-report studies have validity problems. Patients may exaggerate symptoms in order to make their symptoms seem worse, or they may under-report the severity or frequency of symptoms in order to minimize their problems. Patients may also simply be mistaken or misremember the material covered by the survey. Often used semi-structured interview style with followed-up questions and preset question set. Closed questions are provide quantitative data, no insight. Open questions, qualitative data. So, validity. Validity is accuracy. Items that are high in validity accurately address the construct, actually getting the answer for something you wish to measure. Internal validity is the extent to which the causal conclusion based on the study is warranted. Confounding factors often impact the internal validity of the experiment. External validity, whether results of the study can be generalized to other situations and other people. To protect external validity, samples must be completely random and other situation variable must be tightly controlled. Population validity. Population validity is a type of external validity which describes how well the sample used can be extrapolated to a population as a whole. Generalizability. Ecological validity. So ecological validity is a type of external validity which looks at the testing environment in terms of how much it influences behavior. Internal versus external validity. Internal validity describes the extent that a study is able to show a cause and effect relation between the variables tested in the study. External validity describes the extent that results of a study can be generalized or repeated in multiple settings. Testability is an indicator of how much means can be placed upon the test results. Criterion validity assesses whether test results are a certain set of abilities. Is the test valid? Criterion validity refers to whether a variable is able to predict a certain outcome. Concurrent validity measures the test again of a benchmark test and a high correlation indicates the test is a strong criterion value. Concurrent value measures how well a test matches up with a benchmark test, which is usually a null and valid measure of the same construct. Predictive validity is the measure of how well a test predicts ability. It involves testing a group of subjects for a certain construct and then comparing them with a result obtained at some point in the future. Predictive validity is the extent in which excess predicts something that should be able to predict. Construct validity is described as the extent in which the theory is supported by the data, results of the research. Convergent validity is a test that constructs that are expected to be related are, in fact, related. Discriminative validity tests that constructs should have no relation to do, in fact, not having any relationship. Content validity describes the extent that test measures the construct accuracy. It's estimate how much the measured represents each single element of construct. Content validity, or the extent in which assessment measures the entire construct fully. Face validity is the measure of how representative a research project is at a face value, and whether it appears to be a good project, the degree to which a lay person who takes a cursory look at examiner agrees the experiments measuring what they are measuring. Regression to the mean is the first measure is extreme. Second measure, it will be closer to the mean. Confounding variable is change in independent variable may be due to existence of other variations in a third variable. Confounding variable is a third variable in an experiment that could provide alternate explanation to a relationship between the variables of interest. Dependent variable is a dependent variable expected to change based on the manipulation of the independent variable. The independent variable is what's being manipulated. Independent variable is a study is manipulated, where the dependent variable is a factor in the study that is expected to change based on manipulation. Executives in manipulating prices expect to see changes in sales. Temporal confounds is time-related confounding variables. Reliability is consistent in answers across participants. Reliability is the degree to which a assessed tool produces stable and consistent results. Validity refers to the extent in which a measure reflects the phenomenon being studied. Should not use proximal measurements. Should measure construct directly. Retest reliability is shown by a high positive correlation between the first and second administration of the test. Retest reliability consists when the measure is taken multiple times. Inter-rate reliability is consistent with two different people measure the same thing. I remember talking about this in abnormal psychology. Good subject tendency refers to the tendency of participants to act according to what they think their experiment wants. Participant role demands refer to expectations of participant regarding experiment necessities him or her to do. Generalizing to a population. Sometimes when a scientist talks about generalization, they are applying results from a study to a large population, which the sample is selected. For instance, consider the question, what percentage of Canadian population support the Liberal Party? In this case, it would be important for researchers to survey people who respond to the population at large. Therefore, they must ensure the survey response includes relevant groups from large populations in a correct proportions. Counterbalancing is a method to control for any effect that orders of presenting stimuli might have on a dependent variable. The types of control. Vehicular control is what an experiment group does without directly desired impact. Positive control is a treatment with known response, and negative control group with no response. Error types type 1, type 2, power, alpha. Null hypothesis is a statement that suggests there's no relationship between two variables. Alternative hypothesis, confident invariance beta. Confidence level refers to the percentage of all possible samples that are expected to include true population parameter. For example, suggests all possible samples were selected from the same and the confidence interval were computed for each sample. 95 confidence level implies that 95% of the confidence interval would include the true population. 68, 95, 99. Type of biases. Failure to be objective. Hind bias is also known know-it-all effect, creeping determinism, inclination after an event has occurred, it sees the event as having been predictable. despite there being little or no objective basis for predicting it. Can't happen to me bias, also known as normalcy bias, causes people to underestimate both the possibility of disaster occurring and the possible effects. This is also optimistic bias, is another term. Reconstructive bias is a type of bias related to memory. Most research on memory suggests that our memories of the past are not as accurate as we think, especially when we are remembering things of high stress. Attribution bias occurs when participants drop out of a long-term experiment or study. Social desirability bias is a type of bias related to how people respond to research questions. Selection bias refers to a type of bias related to how people are chosen to participate. Subjective bias is self-reported information is always vulnerable to subjective bias. Implicit bias refers to attitudes or stereotypes that affect an individual's understanding, actions, decisions in an unconscious manner. Cognitive bias is the tendency to think in certain ways. Cognitive bias often causes deviation from standard reactionary of good judgment. No definition of social desirable bias. Surveys. Surveys provide a way to sample and measure. Content analysis is the method for summarizing any form of content by counting various aspects of the content. Social network analysis is the process of investigating social structures through the use of network and graphic theories. Participant observation observer participates in ongoing activities and records observations. Participants' observations extend beyond naturalistic observations because the observer is a player in the part. Reactivity is because the observer is a participant in the activities and events being observed, easily influence other people's behavior. Reactivity is influencing what is being observed. Qualitative is just certain like qualities being observed. Quantitative is specific numbers being observed. Operational and operant size is the process of strictly defining variables into measurable factors. This process defines fuzzy concepts that allows them to be measured purely quantitative, allowing them to establish a causal relationship between variables. You want to manipulate the variables at various levels. Embedded field studies, when researchers pose as participants. Retrospective is examine past charts. Prospective looks at charts as they come. Concurrent validity, leading questions demand. Unidirectional relationship is a cause and effect. Reciprocal is a cause and effect. Cause each other. Reciprocity is a social rule that says we should repay in kind what another person had provided us. As people give back, you're obligated to repay favors. So this is nature important in social psychology as they explain the maintenance of social norms. Individuals who benefit from group resources without contributing are known as free riders. Both individual and social groups also punish free riders, even when this punishment results in a considerable cost to the group. Brought into being why it has happened. Association testing, implicit association, and operant spanning testing. Psychological discrimination testing is psychophysics. Psychophysics quantitatively investigates the relationship between physical stimuli and the sensation and perceptions they affect. In statistics, sampling bias is a bias in which the sample is collected in such a way that some members of the intended population are less likely to be included than others. It results in a biased sample, a non-random sample of a population in which its individuals were not equally represented. Analyzing tests. Validity is argued the most important criteria for the quality of the test. The term validity refers to whether or not the test claims it measures. So, how's a good way? VC coins. VC is measuring the criteria for the quality of a test and measures VMC. It measures the amount of claims to measure. A standardized test is any form of test that requires all test takers to answer the same questions or selected from a common bank of questions. So the MCAT's a standardized test. Reliability is one of the most important elements of test quality. It has to do with if you're getting consistent results. over and over again. So types of reliability. Internal is split health method, measures the extent in which all parts of the test contribute equally to what is being measured. External is test retest, measures the stability of a test over time. Inter-rate reliability is the degree in which different raters give constant estimates of the same behavior. Favoredness of the exam refers to the freedom from any kind of bias. Exams should be appropriate for all qualified examples and irresponsible of race, religion, gender, or age. The test should not disadvantage any exam or group of examinees that bases on the examinee's lack of knowledge. Item writers should address the goal of fairness as they undergo the task of writing. Any items that are identified as displaying potential bias or lack of fairness should be revised and dropped from further consideration. Two aspects of generalization. Generalizing the population, we already talked about it. Generalizing theory, we already talked about. We already talked about these, but let's talk about social group. Social group can be defined as two or more people when interacting with one another. We have definitions. Collection of people with common identity. Exogamy is a social arrangement in which marriage is allowed only outside social group. The social group defines the scope and extent in the rules and reinforce. Endogamy is the practice of marrying within a specific. Homogamy is marriage between individuals who are in the same. Homogamy is based on social class status, class, gender, ethnicity, or religion. Heterogamy is married between who are culturally different. Homophily is the tendency people who choose relations with other people with similar attributes. Homophilous sexual network similar to reference group. Preferred mixing indicates there is high level of contact among people who share similar attributes. The orbital frontal cortex is associated with the processing of both positive and negative balance emotions. When activity is lowered in the right hemisphere, euphoria is experienced. Conversely, when dominant and lowered in the left, depression is reported. I'm going to think of happy, right-handed Olivia orbiting the front of the space. The recognition of facial associated with sadness has been linked to the substantial singlet. Think of Subway loves Better Call Saul. Better Call Saul. Singlet man. The insula and basal ganglia are most associated with disgust. Insula is the brain most associated with disgust. Anger is associated with the left superior temporal sulcus. Angry Buddha with left toe. Damage to the basal causes problem recognize angry expression. Link systems utilize order and connections to facilitate memory recovery. Writing down information helps reinforce the memory, but it's not a chunking technique. Prosopagnosia is a neurological disorder characterized by the inability to recognize familiar people based on facial information alone. The fusiform gyrus is part of the visual system in the brain and plays a role in high-level visual processing and recognition. Temporal lobe is responsible for processing auditory signals, interpreting. The parietal lobe is responsible for spatial responding. Visual agnosis, the disorder of the ventral pathway because of inability to recognize the image. Synesthesia is a neurological phenomenon in which stimulation of one sensory kind of leads to automatic involuntary experiences. Calcium 2 is an indicator of chelatin. This positively is extremely versatile, rising this ion post-synaptic central activity dependent plasticity. Important secondary messenger in a neuron. Abnormal amounts has been implicated with Huntington, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia. Informed consent, beneficial, and nominative autonomy. Antipsychotics are a class of psychotic medicine primary used for managing psychosis. Particularly for schizophrenia, bipolar, and increasingly being used in management of antipsychotic. Both tops block dopamine pathways and cause Parkinson-like symptoms. Also treats with dementia, OCD, and anxiety. Typical antipsychotics are used to treat psychiatric conditions. Neuroleptics decreases positive effects of schizophrenia, but can increase negative. Atypical antipsychotics is AAP, second generation antipsychotics. They're a group of antipsychotics, many tranquilizer, block serotonin as well. Less likely to cause extrapyramidal motor control disability. Increased risk of stroke, cardiac death, blood clotting, diabetes. The Thomas theorem is a theory associated formulated by Thomas and D.S. Thomas. Men define situated as real, they are real and their consequence. In other words, an interpretation of a situation causes the action. If Thomas the train is defined as real, it becomes real as its consequences. Hepatic perception is the exploration of objects through touch, most often by hand or fingers. Hepatic perception, think about like the PS5 controller with the hepatic triggers that stimulates the fingers through touch. Active touch. Active touch occurs when a person uses hepatic perception to actually inspect an item. Adaptation is a sensory level of habituation. Phantom pain is the perception of pain in an area of the body which has been removed or lost to a limb. Tototomy is a special map of sound frequencies that are processed by the brain. Dermatomy is the area of the skin with sensory nerves from a single posterior spinal root ganglion. Connectitoma is a neural map of the connections within the brain. Homunculus is a cortical body map of how different areas of the skin represent primary somatosensory cortex. Interference occurs when the participant takes longer to read a word. In psychology, the Streep effect demonstrates the interference in the reaction at time of an event. When the name of a color blue is printed in a color not denoted by the name. Agoraphobia is a fear of open spaces. LSD is a serotonin neurotransmitter. Nicotine is a central stimulant. Amphetamine is a dopamine reuptake blocker. Alcohol is a central depressant. Schizophrenia is positive delusions allowed to negative symptoms described by emotional effect and social withdrawal. Mesolimbic positive effects of schizophrenia. Mesocortex negative dopamine. The mesolimbic pathway is associated with reward. Hypochondriac is a person who is abnormally anxious about their health. Illness anxiety disorders. Individuals diagnosed with anxiety disorder are often more concerned with illness, so the idea of being sick can often lack minimal somatic symptoms. DSM-5 describes paraphernalia as any intense persistent sexual desire other than the genital stimulation or fondling and phenotype normal, physical, mature, and consenting human. Paraphernalia includes sexual sadism, inflicting humiliation, bondage, or suffering, masochism, transvectic, in addition to voyaging. Okay. Teratogen is a sudden environmental factor that disrupts the normal fetal development. Phenol. Teratogens are found in alcohol. Phenylketonuria is a genetic problem consumed by diazoate. Consumption of diazoate during pregnancy would not directly cause polycystic kidney disease is a genetic problem. Autism is not a birth defect. Fetal alcohol syndrome is not directly to the consumption of alcohol during pregnancy. Is directly related to the consumption. Sorry. Neuropeptide Y is a human inhibiting the feeding circuit, blocking sanity. Inhibition causes the peptide Y can cause inhibition of other neurotransmitters. Limits meal. The paraventricular nucleus is a neuron nucleus in the hypothalamus. It contains groups of bodies that activate by stress or physiological changes. Many project to the pituitary gland to release oxytocin, vasopressin in general circulation. Short-term maturation effects of physiological changes that affect outcome measures. Pretesting leads to extreme measurements become more normal. It's called regression towards the mean. Sensory stimulus more referring to the type of information being received from receptors. Proximal stimulus is a stimulation that actually occurs when the sensory is activated. Digital stimulus is the actual stimulus of a project in the real world that you end up sensing due to proximal stimulus. Talked about these, but proximal imperception refers to the physical stimulation allows to measure the observer's sensory apparatus. can also refer to the neural activity that results from a sensory transduction of physical stimulation. Distal stimulation are objects and events often out in the world about you. Digital stimulus is an object which provides information from a proximal stimulus. Proximal stimulus registers via sensory receptors this information is given to the distal. Example will be a person looking at a shoe on the floor. The shoe itself is a distal image. The image recording on the person's retina is the proximal. Another sound would be a telephone ringing. The ring of the telephone is the distal stimulus. The sound would be recognized as understanding the ring of the phone. Word association in the common word game involves an exchange of words that are associated together. The game is based on word association, meaning that stimulation associated word by a word, or the connection and production of other words in response to a given word, done spontaneously by the game. Creative psychiatric evaluation. Psychical physics quantify and investigate the relationship between physical stimuli and sensation and perception they affect. Psychophysics is described as the scientific study of relation between stimulus and sensation. We talked about these. We talked about all these. These are just broad notes. Let's look at the McGurphy effect. The McGurphy effect is a category change in auditory perception that occurs when auditory stimulus does not match the visual stimuli during speech. What? Say that again. The McGurphy is a category change in auditory perception that occurs whenever auditory stimulus does not match the visual stimuli. The melodic intonation therapy is best for non-influent forms of aphasia. Okay. AMC additional. Let's look at AMC additional content. Actually, let's continue from here. There's only like 4 pages left. Receptive aphasia is a fluent aphasia. A person will be able to read or hear, however, when they're unable to understand what's the meaning of communication. Wernicke aphasia is fluent aphasia. Broca is you can't produce the words, but you can understand them. Global aphasia is often a result of damaging an increased portion of the left hemisphere. Broca is a non-fluent form of aphasia. A person with Broca will be unable to produce speech, but be able to understand verbal speech. So, next step notes. Mediating variables. A mediating variable is specific to a given cause. That works indirectly with a more direct cause to a final cause. Mediator adds the overall variance, accounts for the data, and explain that dependence and independence are related. Mediating variables is one explains the relationship between 2 other variables. Explains the relationship between IV and DV. IV accounts for variation in DV. IV accounts for variation in the mediator. Moderating variable is a moderating variable that specifically condition under which given predictor related to an outcome. We already talked about confounding. Heterophilia is a tendency to collect in diverse groups, opposite of homophily. Blank is correct. GABA is the chief inhibitory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system. It plays the principal role in reducing neural exciting. Reversive conditioning is a behavioral conditioning technique in which noxious stimuli are associated with undesirable, unwanted behavior that's modified or abolished. Social cue is a vocal or non-vocal suggestion which can be positive or negative. These cues guide conversation or other social interactions. So let's look at the AMC additional and then call it a day for this document. So, Beck's cognitive therapy is a type of psychotherapy developed by American psychiatrist Beck. CT is one of the therapeutic approaches within a large group of cognitive behavior therapies, and it was found and expounded by Beck in the 1960s. Cognitive therapy is based on cognitive model, which states that thoughts, feelings, and behavior are all connected, like the ABC model, maybe? And individuals for attitude. and that individuals can move toward overcoming difficulties by identifying and changing unhelpful inaccuracy, problematic behavior, and distressing emotional responses. This involves the individual working collaboratively with the therapist to develop skills for testing and modifying beliefs. Opponent process theory is a psychological neurological model that accounts for wide ranges of behavior, including color vision. The diatheist stress model is a psychological theory that attempts to explain behavior as a predisposition vulnerability together with stress. The term diathesis derives from Greek for disposition or vulnerability and takes form of genetic, psychological, biological. Large range of individual differ exists when people have the vulnerability to development of a disorder. Ethical research requires all participants to voluntarily participate in the study. At any point, persons should be able to freely withdraw. Data can no longer be used. Social economic status, defined as consisting of income, education, attachment, or occupational status. Social gradient refers to the negative correlation between social, economic, and population, PO. Ethnographic research involves observing social interactions in a real society, such as interviews. For example, studying the experience of a role strain through observation increases understanding how physicians cope with the challenging demands. Ethnography is a systemic study of people and culture. So remember, ethnography revolves in real society settings. Comparative studies and research studies is cooperative research is a research method in social science that aims to make comparisons across different countries or cultures. Major problem in comparative research is that data sets in different cultures may not be in the same category to find categorical differences. The Flynn effect is an observation regarding the growth of IQ from one generation to the next. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand emotions present in one, and these emotions motivate oneself's other. Median is less susceptible to variation. Egoism is a philosophical concept in which the motivation and instincts for individuals' behavior are based on one's own self-interest. And welfare is the belief that all our behavior and actions are based on the benefits that we receive from it. This is contrast with psychological altruism, which is a process some actions are based on the desire to help others. And these are just definitions. Alright. Conditioned memory is a type of memory that's formed based on the association between two things. For example, if a professor rings a bell at the end of the exam, you remember the bell at the sign of the exam's over. Minority influences occur when a smaller group over time is able to persuade a majority to join their side. A typical social influence this topic is research in depth by Moscative. Minority influence uses conversion and meets from minority groups. Sample of minority influence includes the civil rights movements. When a new idea arises, automatically a minority opinion. Alright. Multi-approach avoidance describes the internal mental debate, sometimes called a conflict. That weighs the pros and cons of differing situations that have both good and bad elements. The name comes from visualizing yourself approaching and avoiding different aspects. Approach conflicts. Two options are both appealing. Avoiding both are unappealing. Approach avoidance is one option has the best aspects, but there are two options. Double approach avoidant consists of two options, both appealing and negative, which seem to represent the jury dilemma. If they rule the defendant guilty, then they could be punishing a criminal, or maybe punishing an innocent. If they rule the defendant innocent, then they would be letting a criminal walk away unpunished, or freeing an innocent. The 6 key principles of influence is reciprocity, which people tend to return a favor in the free samples in marketing. In this conference, he often uses the example of Ethiopia providing thousands of dollars in humanitarian aid to Mexico. Commitment and constancy is if people commit orally in writing to an idea and goal, they're more likely to honor the commitment because establishing the idea as a goal is rooted with themselves. Even the original incentive and motivation is removed after they've been agreed, they will continue to honor the agreement. Social proof is people will do things that they think they see other people are doing. For example, in one experiment, one or more Confederates would look up in the sky. Bystanders would then look up in the sky and see what they were seeing. At one proof, the experiment boarded, so many people were looking up They stop traffic. Authority. People tend to obey authority figures even if they're asked to perform objective. Milgram experiments example. Liking. People are easily persuaded by other people that they like. Such as sites marketing Tupperware is what might they call viral marketing. More likely to buy if they like the person selling it. Scarcity. People's scarcity would generate demand. Fail for limited time only. And conveying scarcity generally can influence others. In that case, opinions. The more people that agree, the more likely it occur. Spatial discrimination is the ability to perceive any separate points. The contact the two blunt points of compass that have applied to the skin. And then just the citations of this content. So pretty good. I like it. Pretty good. We made it through all the content, so I can say I have viewed everything for this document. So, we have finished the document, and then now I'm taking a break real quick, and then I'm going to do some UWorld.